everybody, and welcome to my gallery. The exhibition you will see is about the task-based learning method. The first room that we are going to visit show us what are the beginnings of this method, what are the underlying principle and characteristics of this method, and how this method was originated, and what are the roles of the students and the teacher. So, welcome to the gallery, and it's going to be a pleasure for me to be your guide on this trip. So, we are going to visit our first room, but it's necessary to clarify uh, what is the task-based uh, language teaching. This method focuses on the use of authentic language to complete meaningful tasks in the target language, such task can include visiting the doctor, conducting an interview, going to the supermarket, or calling a customer service for help. Now that we know what is the task-based learning approach, we are going to start visiting our first room. In this first room, we are going to know the origins of the task-based learning method, what are the principles and characteristics of this method, and what are the roles of the teacher and the student. The origins of the task-based learning method. There was a time when this was a fairly radical concept, task-based learning teaching, as known today. Was first developed in 1980 by the N. Prabhu, a teacher and researcher in the Bangalore, South India. And now we are going to know what are the characteristics of this method. This method gives an emphasis on learning to communicate through interaction in the target language. The second characteristic is that introduces authentic test into the learning situation. The third characteristic is that provides opportunities to learner to focus not only in the language, but also on the learning process itself. Number four, it ends the learner's own personal experiences, an important contribution to the element of the classroom learning. And the number five characteristic is that attempts to link classroom language learning with language activation outside the classroom, which is very important. The general principles of this method are number one, that it has a relevant task. Task-based learning task can be categorized by the type of mental process used in the activity, such as listing, comparing, problem solving, creative thinking, and sharing personal experience. Another principle is that tasks are extremely varied, but all share several common features. They must focus on meaning and comprehension rather than repetition and recitation. Number three is that students learn by interacting. Sitting in a classroom and listening an hour for a class is not conducive to a language acquisition. And so the students needs to be engaged and encouraged to participate. So they need to be interactive. Is focus on using an elitist and authentic language. The language used with the students needs to be genuine and viable in order to experience to be effective and useful for them. Errors as a part of the learning process. So the teacher needs to be sure that when he make a correction, the confidence of the students continue, to be strong, because if not, we limit the participation of the student. The next principle is that it's focused on the process as a whole rather than the end of the product. So learning is just a process, and teacher must provide students with the tools that they need and give guidance and encourage students to call upon previous language and personal experiences. Uh, the other principle is that participation in and completion of tasks is extremely motivational. You know, the task addresses real life needs and allows the students to use their backup language, tools to meet those needs. Another principle is that tasks provide two key processing elements that are necessary for learning a language. That is input and output. Copying lines and reciting a song or poem are incapable of meeting the criteria of their very design. Incorporating opportunities for both input and output into every task enable language learners to practice negotiation, listening and verifying, rephrasing, and on the spot thinking, all the things that occurs naturally in our lives on a daily basis. In this room, we're also going to see what is the teacher role and what is the student role. The teacher, take a role of motivate to be a motivator. The teacher should engage in the negotiation of meaning while the student try to deal with the input and outputs demand raised by the task. The teacher should produce a wide variety of question cues and prompts to elicit learned output. And the role of the student, is students need to solve tasks that are relevant and interesting to them. In order to solve the task, the students need to use the target language. They are learning to communicate with their peers. They use authentic language instead of answering grammars or vocabulary question about the language. So this is a very important part of the the roles that the teachers and the students takes with the task-based learning method. So the next room that we are going to visit talk about the the advantage and disadvantage of the task-based learning. Advantage of the task-based learning is, that getting the students to use their skills and their current level of developing language through its use. It has the advantage of placing the focus on the students toward achieving a goal, where language becomes a tool, making the use language necessarily. One disadvantage of this method. There is no acquisition of new grammar or vocabulary feature. Everything is left to the teacher. No, not all the students are or will be motivated by the task-based learning. Some of the students need more guidance and will not or cannot notice language form. We're talking about the grammar. Another element of accuracy. Another disadvantage is that also the student needs to have a little bit knowledge about the target language to communicate with their peers. In the third room, we're going to answer two questions. Is the method appropriate for elementary school? And I believe it's not appropriate because the kids needs to have knowledge of the target language to communicate. Considering that school-age students are exposed to a very limited input and many times this input occurs in a large group setting, how effective is this method to provide a student with a meaningful input? This method is a good, to provide input, because the students are going to complete a task and they're going to learn about the vocabulary, and they're going to learn about the situation that we can live in the real life. So the input, the input is meaningful for the students. Thank you very much to visit my gallery, and I hope I fulfill your expectation with this subject. Thank you so much for visiting.